Welcome to GIRT by the Australian Prosperity Institute, the podcast that answers serious questions with calm answers.
That's a great tag.
I don't know. Wait. Yeah, I'll try that again. Serious questions, calm answers.
No.
There we go. That's the tag. Welcome to GIRT. I'm Ethan, and this is
Owen. Hello, I'm Owen.
a little bit of a pause there. So if you're listening to these consecutively, sure. If not, anyway, part 2 of the episode where we're exploring the rise of the right-wing popular movement in the Western world.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the first part of this, we explored and discussed the economic reasons for this rise.
Yeah.
And gave it a bit of backstory and explored that theory there. I think we closed out on the whole horseshoe and the optimism theory of like, if we could just give everyone a house, we wouldn't care about the color of your skin.
Yeah.
That's kind of the summary of that. Speaking of ethnicities, we're going to explore now the part 2 hypothesis of, why this rise. Is it cultural?
Yeah.
Is there a level of cultural anxiety?
So this is the dark part of the two-parter. And we're also going to talk about social media.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We'll tail end that on that third hypothesis. So what issues do One Nation voters actually prioritize?
Okay. Well, they've been polled, and this will come as no surprise to anybody, but 41% of One Nation voters say that immigration is the most salient political issue that is deciding their vote. And I don't think this is going to be a surprise to anybody. I mean, One Nation have always sort of been a one-issue party. They've been talking about immigration forever. It's interesting how, as the types of immigration sort of assimilate into Australian society, Pauline Hanson's always figured out a way to find a new scapegoat.
Yeah, it feels like it's the same problem, different flavor.
Yeah, I mean,
Asians in the 90s.
Yeah.
And now it's the Muslims. And
this is kind of true for I think Australian history. Is that there's been all these different waves of immigration throughout history that after a generation are
yeah. It feels like there's a similarity of that. Exactly. Yeah, like I think that's where the similarity of the US and the Australian story match a little bit, where it's like where both countries are migrants, original inhabitants. Migrants come, colonizers come, then migrants come. Bloody Irish, bloody Catholics, both countries were against them. Then it was Southern Europeans, Italians, Greeks, bugger them, right?
Yeah.
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 So like if One Nation could have had a rise in the, post-war boom, if there wasn't such an economic boom at the time, they could have been mad at Italians.
Yeah.
Or Greek migrants who were coming over from war-torn Europe.
Yeah. And then now, I mean, it seems to say that, the third generation of, Australians with Italian and Greek heritage are not, I mean, it seems absurd to think about them as not, fully Australians.
Yeah.
And I think, even One Nation voters would actually, this is kind of interesting. This is maybe something we should look up I wonder if there's been, polling done on how many people from, like first and second generation immigrant communities are actually voting One Nation.
Oh,
which
that would be interesting.
It is interesting.
Yeah. Are they all lineaged back to the original convicts?
Yeah. Well, I mean, how many Australians have that claim? I certainly don't.
No, me not. I think I've got German dairy farmers from the 1850s.
There we go. Well, I think I'm Welsh and Scottish.
Yeah.
So yeah. We'll get this chart up on the
look at that
screen.
It's been up there the whole time. Magic of editing.
Crazy.
Yeah. Not for the listeners, but the viewers.
Yeah, you can see that immigration is clearly a much bigger issue for One Nation voters than the rest of the rest of Australia.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then also interestingly, cost of living is a lesser.
It's down on the rung of problems.
It's down on the rung. And that's probably because, when the pollsters ask, they give them 5 and they tell them to rank them 1 to 5. And then, I think that it's hard to actually gauge how much of how much you do care about each individual issue if you're asking that question in a list form. And, and then also something we touched on in the last episode was housing, which is also interesting. So
what's that? That's at least in their top 3 or?
No.
What?
So, One Nation voters, when they're polled and asked to put the issues that are most salient to them in choosing their vote, they're actually the lowest out of all of the groups in terms of housing. So
really? Or is that like number 5 then?
I'd actually have to look at the poll more to know how many options they were given.
Yeah.
But, in terms of like the most salient issue, 7% of Labor voters, 9% of Liberal voters, 4% of One Nation voters, 18% of Greens voters, interestingly. So, which makes sense because, Greens voters are younger. They're a younger demographic, and you'd assume that. The younger demographic are the most affected by expensive rents and, an inaccessible housing market. So that
I think I saw another thing. It was like a lot of Green voters are women as well.
Yeah.
And they probably have higher rents because they're living closer in the cities.
Is that true?
For specific jobs. I don't know. But I know that the percentage of people that vote Greens, it's higher in women than it is in men of the same age demographic.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. I wonder if housing is like the thing that's like driving that, or if it's more like other social issues like I think that women by and large are more progressive than men. Like not in general, speaking generalization. So
yeah, as all we're allowed to do and all we can do as 2 white men, but yes.
Yeah, it gets tricky to talk about culture, doesn't it? Yeah. So I think instead of talking about trying to like take on like the cultural argument of One Nation voters, which is kind of dicey and maybe unhelpful and maybe even platforming, it sort of might be interesting to think about the left's sort of response to this rise in cultural anxiety in the Western world, and this is something I wanted to talk about, was how it's like it's different from the economic populist left, like the Bernie Sanders wing of, say, the Democrats compared to Joe Biden. I think it might be a good idea to actually
give a little spiel of it,
to watch both of these clips.
Yeah, because the tail end of the last episode we played Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
And you're going to play a bit of Biden?
Yeah. So this is one of Joe Biden's sort of like biggest, most remembered speeches, where he's talking about being a battle for the soul of the nation. And he's talking about, democracy and the Trumpism and it's being a threat to the moral fabric of America.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, different to,
it's very different to the sentiment Bernie was putting forward. Exactly,
yeah. Bernie was saying we have a lot to unify on in terms of economic dispossession, and there's like an economic narrative that can join us in a coalition. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think Biden's really sort of throwing down and saying, this is sort of like an existential sort of moral issue.
Yeah,
I'll play the
yeah, we can play it.
Clip.
Let me throw out a question. Yeah. You are living, shock of all shocks, in the wealthiest country in the history of the world. Do you feel that down here?
No. People are not surviving. We just had our food bank yesterday. We usually pack for 80 people. We served 102 yesterday. It is getting worse. Nobody's surviving right now.
My husband works at the hospital, and there are several ODs every single day.
Only a town of 6,000.
Yeah, we're not a big town.
When he said after Charlottesville, there were, and I quote, very fine people on both sides. I said then it gave license and safe harbor to white supremacists and neo-Nazis and to the Ku Klux Klan. These words not only stunned America, but they stunned the world. And in doing so, he assigned a moral equivalence between those spewing hate and those with the courage to stand against it. I said at the time, We're in a battle for the soul of this nation.
Very different.
Yeah.
Which then, like, you when you hear these arguments coming out of the US on their, political spectrum fights, blah, 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 on their platforms, it's like, oh, Bernie Sanders, he's the lefty, left idiot, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
But then, that would be throwing them into the cultural argument, which seems to be what the left really prioritize and want to talk about, is cultural issues, right?
Yeah.
Then you've got Biden there who's falling into that category, though. And then the clip we played before with Bernie, he seems to be talking more about economics.
Yeah.
And then economics is inherently more of a right-wing sort of thing to talk about.
Yeah.
Not like it's a right-wing, but like right of, the whole thing. Like they're both Democrats, they're lefties, whatever, but in the US. But yeah, you know what I mean? Like you would assume that Biden would be the one taking the economic front.
Yeah, it's interesting.
But then him and probably people that back him can't, because they can't, they're not from a working class background. You know what I mean? Like there's, like
they're not.
You know what I mean? Like there's that.
They're not talking about radical redistribution.
Yeah.
So Bernie Sanders is talking about the economy, but he's talking about radical redistribution of wealth from the top to the bottom, making a fairer, more sort of equal society.
Like Bernie's argument is probably pointing at people who would back Biden.
Yeah, totally.
In fact, people from Biden's background.
There's a clip in that video from More Perfect Union where he's talking about that. Actually, he says that the Democrats have abandoned rural people.
Yeah.
And Bernie Sanders he runs with Democrats, but he's actually an independent. He ran for president as an independent.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a bit of space there in between the center left and the I don't know what you want to call Bernie Sanders, maybe the populist left or I don't know if that's like a pejorative term. Like I like a lot of the things Bernie Sanders says, but I think there is a bit of a gap there. And where center left politicians might talk about the economy in terms of like productivity and about investment and things that are like more moderate and more like palatable to people in the center right.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of wealth taxes and radically reshifting the chess pieces so that richer people have a lot of their money taken off them and it's spread out to poorer people is a little bit more of a toxic sort of like
don't touch my Easter eggs.
Yeah, well, you're entering a bit of a minefield there that I think like people that are more like centrist left probably want to talk about opportunity or talk about health, offering services and choice in services. And it's less of like an extreme viewpoint for the states. Although it's interesting that, like the states is, I feel like so sort of like, so I think the Overton window in the United States is further to the right than in Australia and
naturally
the UK.
Is, because like the comparison that people draw is like the Democrats are basically liberals.
Yeah.
In Australia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, and they're small L liberals, like liberal,
economically liberal.
Yeah. Or like, the philosophy and, which, the moderates of the Liberal Party probably have more in common with, someone like Hillary Clinton.
Yeah. Our moderate liberals will be more of a Hillary Clinton.
Yeah. So like I heard,
or a Biden even. Not that Biden.
Yeah.
Not the cultural spitting Biden, but yeah.
The economic,
The economic, yeah.
So I heard Alistair Campbell talking on his podcast about saying that like, Bernie Sanders in the UK would be a Lib Dem.
Yep.
So he'd be like a centrist in the UK.
Yeah.
So the battle is sort of between social democracy and liberalism, whereas in the States it's more like liberalism and libertarianism or hard conservatism.
Yeah. And I've heard if Bernie was here, it'd be a Labor.
Yeah.
Because he's just saying, I just want basic things,
well,
basic wages.
He wants Medicare.
Yeah, Medicare for people.
And a right to unionize.
Wages, right to unionize. Yeah. Fair superannuation in a sense. Some kind of retirement funds. Bernie's spitting all those things.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So yeah, So it goes to show you like there's, it's sort of apples and oranges comparing the two systems, I suppose. Joe Biden's framing of this rise of the populist right as this sort of thing about morals, and it hides that the systemic causes. It's not talking about the systemic causes, like, which is that what we were talking about in the last episode, which is, you know, it's the economy. You know, the economy is the reason why we're having this populist right surge, and we just need to fix the economy and make it fairer, and then people will, you know, the working class will unite, and our
we'll wear Jeff Bezos' skin as a new hat or something. Yeah,
it's funny.
Is that what we're? There goes my Amazon ad. But yeah.
So interesting.
So the point is that, you know, it's less of a material and more of an identity anxiety, or
yeah. So I think, you know, and I think that benefits certain you know, sections of society that don't want to, you know, they don't want to pay more tax, and they don't want a bigger government, and they don't want more services, and you know, if they frame it all on cultural issues, then it sort of gives them a break from having to, you know, solve some of the rising inequality that we're seeing in the Western world.
Okay.
Yeah.
So those behind this main cultural push are the wealthy, convincing people that it's a cultural issue, or
I mean, if you were like, you know,
or like the seed is there, but
we might
is
be
now
sort
being
of
watered with, you know, reassurances from billionaires who own the media outlets, who own the social medias, who are feeding this tiny little seed of insecurity that people may have, just because they haven't said hello to their Vietnamese neighbor. And if they just got to know them, they'd be like, oh, we got pretty similar thing going here.
Yeah.
But because they haven't said hello yet, it's still a scary foreign thing. It's, you know, it's a human nature thing. You know, person darker than me comes over the horizon, I'm going to get my caveman stick and beat him.
Yeah. Rough.
But then, you know, that's just inherent seed. But like, is that what it is?
Yeah. So, like, I mean, I think, like, you know, you're probably making an argument that, like, a lot of, like, people on the, you know, in the Bernie camp would agree with. You know, that it's like, it's a bait and switch, and they're trying to, like, you know, they're trying to
look at me, look at him.
Yeah, they're trying to divert your attention away from the real battle, which is between the 1% and the 99%, and towards all of this identitarian stuff where that big coalition of you know, working class voters sort of can fall apart, because instead of being we're all working class, where, you know, we are white and black and brown and all the other things.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the seed's always there, like that underlying cultural scare, fear of the other. That's why the rise of the right, or,
you know, like,
has it been accelerated because of recent economic issues, or?
This is an really interesting question. And in Australia, it's sort of like, you know, so this is, I mean, you know, it's a tough thing to face, but I suppose we could talk about it. Like, One Nation's polling has risen. Has Australia become more racist in the last year?
Don't know.
I mean, it doesn't.
As a white guy, I haven't experienced it. You know, you can't.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't really make sense. Like, actually, now I'm thinking about it. Like, there has to be more to it. You know?
Like, if it was a cultural thing, wouldn't it have been like there'd be, you can point at the US and you'd be the easy underlying thing of they had a big slave trade.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm not denying that Australia had a little bit of a slave thing going on too.
Yeah,
you know,
for sure. And a lot of Australians don't know that.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
There's the images of, you know, Indigenous people in locked up in chains. And then there's also the blackbirding, where we would take people from Polynesian islands and bring them over to far north Queensland and make them, you know, grow the corn, right?
Yeah.
Pick the corn. Not the corn, the sugar cane, right?
Sugar cane, yeah.
Sugar cane. Look it up, blackbirding in Australia. But that either we've paved over it and we don't think about it as much.
Yeah.
Or that scar isn't as deep, but then we've still got the Indigenous thing where we'll kick that down the road. Let's not deal with that. Let's vote no on this.
On the voice.
On the voice. Let's vote no on.
Well, you wonder how much that going down at the referendum sort of emboldened some of the darker parts of Australia. Not, you know, like, not in skin tone, but in terms of, like, rhetoric and
bigotry.
Yeah.
The dark side of bigotry, like the bigoted dark side of Australia. You know, like, would that have been there? Or like, that's a whole conversation itself, the voice, you know, like there's that theory of if all the facts were out when they announced it and didn't leave such a window for, you know, right-wing populists, cultural issues to fill that void with a false narrative of like, oh, it's just going to be a bunch of Indigenous people telling everyone how to live. And it's like, well, no, the whole, you know, if we, that's a whole theory of if Labor put forward what it was going to be about, what it is structurally to begin with, just an advisory board enshrined in the Constitution, so that
and this is why
Indigenous people can tell us what they need rather than us throwing money at an issue. That's kind of pretty much it, right?
Yeah,
that's my understanding of it.
Yeah, and then the campaign started too late, and you know, I mean, in Australia voted against it pretty so emphatically.
Is that an example of there's a level of bigotry in Australia? Or,
I mean, I think it's like,
you know, before the campaign started, if you ask people, would they have said, yeah, sure, whatever, or would they have said no to begin with?
Well, you know, you look at the polling on the Voice, it came out strong, you know, like when it was first proposed as an idea, and then it slowly that lead slowly ate away. And I think the Peter Dutton's got a lot to, and David Littleproud and the Nationals have a lot to, you know, them coming out against it. If it was a bipartisan thing, then, you know, maybe it would have had a different result.
I feel like this could have been something the right side of politics could have, if I'm a marketing genius here, you know, they could have come out and been like, all right, are you sick of feeling guilty for being an Australian in this country?
Yeah.
You know, feeling bad about all this Indigenous stuff. All right, well, if you vote yes on this, we don't have to feel guilty anymore and we can move forward as a nation.
Wow.
Like, I feel like that would have been the marketing.
Yeah. Well, you know? I mean, you know, they could
like that. I've got, you know, right-wing family members, and I sold it to them like that.
Yeah.
And they were like, yeah, that feels like a great idea.
Yeah, right.
You know?
Well, I'm
sick of feeling guilty about being an Australian. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
You
well, you should have been on there. You should have been campaigning, you know.
Yeah, right. I should have struck earlier.
If you managed to change their minds, that yeah, I mean, you know, like the Liberals had an opportunity to unify the country, I think, there, and they chose
no for no sake.
Well, I mean, you know, and then they thought they were on a political winner, and it totally threw out all their polling, because their internal polling said that you know, if someone voted no in the Voice, they were going to vote for Peter Dutton, and then they didn't.
And then he didn't win,
and he lost his seat, and you know, the Labor Party had a landslide, and you know, that's the story there. Yeah, so
that's why it's confusing in Australia. You know, you can't just draw that comparison.
Yeah, it's tough, man, because it's like, you know, it's confronting our inner demons. And this is where I'm a bit scared that the economic, you know, argument is kind of might be a bit naive. I hope it's not, but you know, I worry that you know, the radical redistribution will not solve the wound of you know, Australia's you know, colonial history and racial tensions, which is, you know, it's a frightening thing to think about.
Because there is people that, you know, feel a level of resentment. I'm sure they probably vote for One Nation or someone far off. But, you know, why do, like, even just the level of, you know, not fairly distributing, but at least the level of bringing everyone up through equity and bringing everyone to the starting line together.
Yeah.
And it's like, why do these Indigenous people get to have, you know, free uni? Why do they get to have this? Why do they get to have that?
Yeah.
There's people in Australia like that.
And then the economic argument would say that if they weren't feeling like they were going without, then they wouldn't feel like envious of, they wouldn't have that racial envy. And then, you know, it would sort of, it's really tricky. And, you know, a lot of that's misinformation as well. Like, I want to say, like, you know, like there's some of the things I hear about, you know, people saying like, you know, that, you know, Indigenous people get these preferential welfare treatment it's not true.
It's not.
So, but, you know, but it's very incendiary, which I think sort of maybe brings us to our
the cultural argument,
our next point about social media and how that sort of changed our politics.
Yeah. We want to jump on that already. Sure.
Yeah.
The social media front. So with it, are voters becoming more extreme? Are their political incentives changing? Is social media a contributing factor to that? Are the people behind social media the leading cause of that? Like we touched base on it before of like, is it the billionaires or like we've already touched base on that, but is it?
Well, I mean, it's funnily enough that it actually fits into that left populist sort of anti-monopoly, argument, where you sort of, if you frame it as Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg, tearing at the fabric of civility and social cohesion and political stability, then it does become a 1% versus 99% sort of argument, which is interesting. But there's something I wanted to talk about for this sort of segment was this. It's a philosopher, a Canadian philosopher called Marshall McLuhan, who wrote something in 1964 about saying the medium is the message, which I think a lot of people may have heard about this because it's a very famous sort of philosophical idea. And he was talking about, I suppose in his life, he would have seen politics respond to the invention of and widespread use of the radio and then the television. And his sort of argument was that that the medium is actually more powerful than the content of the message in terms of like shaping the way that people think.
Medium being the content distributor, not the medium of statistic.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. I misheard it before. I was like,
like medium is in like
the medium opinion of everyone? No, it's the medium of like the media outlet.
The media outlet.
I misheard that before.
So like, a radio is different to print media.
Yeah.
And, print media changed the way that people think because the written word allowed ideas to be shared.
Yeah. Like if you wanted
disseminated.
if you wanted a history lesson of that.
Yeah.
Martin Luther right back in the day with the printing press.
Yeah.
Slapping his problems with Catholicism on the face of a church, being able to print that out.
Yeah.
And distribute that. That being a big deal.
Yeah. And like, I mean, you even go further back than that. I mean, like back to like, ancient times. I mean, what a huge leap forward for human civilization being able to write ideas down. Yeah.
Carving it into stone.
And then this is like, and his argument's kind of like, it perennially pops up because whenever there's a new medium shift, it's sort of, the story starts making sense again. And this is like, I think this is
because like, wealthy people starting to buy newspapers and being able to print their own, so beforehand, with empires, right? You could print things, declarations of what's going to happen in your colonies and then send it out on ships and declare these things.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was the medium.
Yeah.
And then you fast forward a bit more, industrial revolution, people are starting to get a bit more wealthy on the labor of others.
Yeah.
And then they start buying newspapers to share their opinions and control, political decisions.
Yeah.
There's a history
of editorial.
Of that. Yeah. Right. So there's that whole thing and history rhymes.
Yeah.
And is there a repeat of that as an example with this new medium, social media, in a sense, not just the internet, but social media?
Yeah.
Aspect of the internet where you got Elon Musk buying Twitter and Trump building his own Truth Social.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure.
And then before then, I guess would have been TV. But
yeah.
If we want to,
So this is like
just giving examples.
This is like what you're talking about is like the political economy approach that like people, it's like the way that people wield power, and it's individuals, using media companies to influence politics.
Mm-hmm.
But like Marshall McLuhan was actually kind of, he was talking about the actual medium itself,
okay.
Not as a means of being able to be manipulated by connected or powerful people to control the masses, but actually the way that people think changes, because of the way that they consume information. And superficially, right, like in the 60s, like politicians become handsome, because they need to
be on TV. Yeah,
they need a campaign and be on TV.
Well, I didn't mind the old bearded mustached politician back in the day. Oh, they were pretty handsome.
Yeah, but they became inappropriate for the JFK. He's this handsome guy who speaks well, and he goes well on TV.
Presents beautifully on TV.
And Nixon struggled on TV because he was quite, he wasn't
sweating bullets.
Yeah, he wasn't the most attractive dude, and he didn't speak properly and whatever. So, he didn't come across as well
as charismatic.
Yeah. So and then you follow that on, and then now we have now the TV is this legacy thing that I personally haven't had my antenna plugged in my house since I left home. So I've just been I've completely missed commercial TV for nearly 20 years.
I think the last thing I watched on commercial TV would have been Ready Steady Cooked.
Yeah, right.
Like 15, 20. Yeah, like 15 years ago.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I think like most people, like you're, sorry, I don't even know. You're like a millennial? Like,
I don't know. I'm 30, 31.
31. Yeah, so I'm 34. So yeah, our whole life is different to every generation that came before it because we the way we consume media has become like fragmented. And
so in a way, we're similar to, what was his name? The Canadian?
Marshall McLuhan.
Right. You were saying he lived through that period of the transition from newspaper, radio, TV. Yeah. We're in a similar situation where it's the TV, the internet,
social media.
Yeah,
and vertical video, which I think is like the next revolution.
Really,
like TikTok.
There's a distinction between the two.
I do, because it's just, and the algorithm as well. The way that instead of what you consume being decided by gatekeepers with who use their taste and judgment to decide what people should watch. Mm-hmm. And there's previously there might be like 5 gatekeepers in a political system. Like that.
Yeah, as I was saying before, we're like
5 TV stations or 5 newspapers and then
like Henry Ford with his oil, isn't Henry Ford? No, Rockefeller or something, right?
Yeah.
He would have owned the newspapers, and he would have been the vetting process. He would have been the and he would have dictated what would have gone into the paper.
Yeah, and then if you want to maybe like a more warm and fuzzy version would be like, or at least to me with my politics, would be like Lenore Taylor, who's just stopped being the editor of the Guardian. Lenore Taylor, I really liked what she did with the Guardian, and I thought she's there to sort of, I guess, like set the standard and say, we're gonna fact check things, and we're not gonna put things out just because they're salacious. Yep. And we're trying to there's the entertainment part. I mean, it's a business, but we're trying to but we're also trying to inform people. So we're trying to give people their vegetables as well. Mm-hmm. We're trying to make sure that people are understanding policy so that they can vote properly in elections
and just feel informed, be informed, not just feel informed, be informed.
Yeah.
That'd be the difference, right?
Yeah.
With Murdoch print, the Australian.
I think they do good news, but they
it's more about how do we get people to read it and keep reading it.
Yeah.
I guess Sky News is an example.
Yeah. Sky News or Herald Sun.
Sky News compared to the ABC.
Yeah.
ABC's a bit boring, dry. Ugh, this idiot's still talking.
Yeah.
And then with the Sky News, it's like, we need to keep you watching.
Yeah.
What are they doing today? Oh my God, can you believe this?
Yeah. It's more incendiary.
Yeah.
And then social media is just like that on steroids,
Yeah.
So
and now it's not an individual person having to, curate the medium. Yeah.
There's many more gatekeepers.
It's like an algorithm in a sense where it's
and paradoxically, there's one gatekeeper. There's many creators, and then paradoxically, it's like one company. If you use Facebook and Instagram, then you're all of your consumption is coming from one company, but also it's all coming from potentially millions of different creators, or you've become siloed into this little echo chamber of and then this makes it harder for the media to do their kind of warmer, fuzzier sort of more constitutional sort of aspects of their job, which is like inform people, create a space for like reasoned public debate that is like fact checked as much as is possible, and like if they become weaker and weaker and weaker, and then the people that fill the space are don't have those checks in place, then there's more misinformation and disinformation, and people lie more, and especially with the algorithm, like feeding people what they engage with, then
in shorter and shorter format too.
And with more dopamine and more stimulation and more and this,
as well as there's that level of like the way the algorithm reacts, it's reinforcing.
Yeah,
because it's like, all right, well, they've watched this, right? So we'll know to feed them more content like this to keep them watching this.
So say they see
there's a message. Yeah, like
from One Nation.
Yeah,
and they linger on it. Yeah,
they linger on a bit.
Yeah, because it's incendiary.
Yeah,
and it's it's way out there, and it's kind of offensive, and it's like the car, driving past the car crash, you sort of
slow down a little bit.
Yeah, you want to slow down a bit, but then there's this technological architecture that's so he started a car crash, let's send him another car crash and another car crash and another car crash, and then and then
like as an example, a lived example, there's that trend of creating AI generated Pixar trailers.
Yeah.
For movies that are very edgy, and then it'll be like jokes about the black dad going to get milk, and then it's like, how long? Just animated characters playing out that scene of like, how long are you going to be gone? I don't know, until I find milk, and then which leans into the racist stereotype of black dads are always leaving, absent fathers, blah blah blah, and there'll be like compilations of things like that of right.
And this is the pipeline,
and then you'll watch one, and then YouTube will be like, oh, you want another one? You want another one?
Yeah. Or how about like the I want to get fit, to UFC, to supplements, to Alex Jones, to Trump.
Oh, you mean there's the flow to it too?
Yeah.
I haven't noticed a flow on mine, but I've just noticed it's like, is the exact same thing over and over and over again.
Yeah. So like, I think like these arguments are like kind of a bit risky, because they sort of risk like, downplaying people's actual thoughts that they've come up with themselves. Like, it's very tempting, I think, from the left of the world, when you come up against like a thorny issue of like a big rise in a populist right, movement with like pretty overtly white supremacist rhetoric.
Yeah.
That you almost want to like soothe yourself and say like, oh, they're not real. They don't really think that. They're just fooled by the algorithm, or they're economically displaced, and they're venting their frustration about housing, or I think there's a risk to that, because one, it kind of patronizes the people who are voting One Nation, and it also kind of obscures this darker thing, which is what we're talking about today.
What's the term? It's like something bigotry. The
I suppose you're saying like you're trying to like explain away bigotry by saying that they don't know.
I've heard it used in where it's like, oh, we need to do everything we can to help immigrants and this and that and that. It's just like, all right, but you're assuming they can't do that themselves, so therefore you're assuming they're less than. So then there's like this subtle layer of racism or something. I don't know. What is it? What is the term? But then I'm hearing it come the other way, where it's like, oh, you think One Nation people are all dumbasses because they can't.
They don't know why they feel the way they do.
Yeah. Pattern. The bigotry of low expectations or something, I think. Benevolent prejudice. Yeah, whatever.
Bigotry of low expectations. I like that.
I think that's what the term is.
Yeah.
Assuming a group cannot meet high standards, so expecting less of them.
Right.
Which feeds into like implicit bias, the unconscious assumption about people based on their identity. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, the bigotry of low expectations. I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
That's the term.
Anyway. I think it's an interesting thing to like,
a phrase describing the patronizing or harmful assumption that certain individuals or groups are incapable of high achievement. Yeah. Due to their background or race or ability.
Right. So it's almost like, that's an interesting way of like thinking about, normally I imagine that kind of bigotry would be like, attributed to, minorities, but I suppose, One Nation voters are still a minority in Australia, by the grace of God. But
Touch wood.
but yeah, I suppose you're kind of right. Like it's ascribing low expectations to this group of people by explaining away their bigotry through the economic disenfranchisement or social media algorithm.
Yeah, which feeds into the dehumanizing of them, which then like turns it into, that's what makes it become that. Like, I feel like that's what the underlying issue is with, instead of it being an economic problem where we can horseshoe it around and be happy kumbaya.
Yeah.
But then when you start going down the social issues and the social reason, like the social anxiety reasons of the rise of One Nation or right-wing populism, it is underlined with, at least on the left, when they argue against it, it's bedded in that bigotry of low expectations. You assume them, you're dehumanizing, you're thinking they're less than, rather than, and this isn't me like justifying right-wing people or people who are like in the Biden clip earlier of like, marching at the Charlottesville thing.
Yeah.
I'm not saying all of their points of view are right. Maybe they are technically, but anyway, I know what I mean? Like it's right-wing, but no, let's play on words there. But no, what I'm getting at is it's like, all right, what are the circumstances that have led them to that path?
Yeah.
But then when you turn it into that dehumanization, that bigotry of low expectations argument, you've written those people off, and you've turned it into this thing where there is no room for negotiations or discussions, or you can't have a healthy conversation with these people.
Yeah, because you're basically saying that they don't know what they think. And also you're not listening to them when they speak. Like you're not, you're like if somebody says, I'm a white supremacist, and then you say, no, you're not a white supremacist. You just don't know how to use Instagram, and you don't realize that you've been economically displaced, and you actually have solidarity with the working class.
Yeah.
And you've misplaced your class anxiety for cultural anxiety. It can sound condescending.
Yeah, talking down to them. Yeah.
And it might be unwise also, because you might not actually be looking at the root cause of the issue, which is, and you might not be able to fix it.
Yeah. Which time and time again proves that just leads to those people doubling down.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
And it can go the other way.
Well, I mean, there's a lot to be said for like, a sort of a cultural backlash to, people perceiving that they don't like being talked down to.
Yeah.
By academics and people who have like progressive podcasts like we do, and
like glasses.
Or people use academic language, and it's this, and this is obviously just another theory, right? And I don't really know where I put my it's probably a combination of a lot of it is a combination of a lot of things, but like I think that I'm worried about this naivety of the economic left populist sort of argument that we can just sort of like,
throw money at the problem.
Well, yeah.
And pull them out of their racism with money.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, it's kind of fraught with danger, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although that being said though, that there is like, there's some interesting stuff happening inside the Liberal Party in Australia in terms of, this algorithm debate.
Okay. What do you got?
Charlotte Mortlock, who was a former Liberal staffer who started a network called the Hilmer Network, which was this group of people who were trying to get good Liberal women candidates pre-selected, thinking that the future of the Liberal Party is going to have a lot more women in it, and a lot more like really competent, great like business leaders that are women, and and this is their path to modernity. She just quit the Liberal Party because
after Susan Lee
got rolled. And I don't know what's going on in her head, but I could imagine if I had lived her life and I'd spent my life trying to push the party in this direction towards like
get more of the
equal
other
representation and
of the country involved,
and modernity and having like great Liberal women politicians, seeing Susan Lee get rolled. And then I think also that, there was that video of, the images of those four, Liberal men power brokers and Andrew Hastie and Angus Taylor all meeting in this, Melbourne house and plotting the end of the first female Liberal leader. And there wasn't a woman there. And, I think a lot of
that image can be very confronting for someone whose goal was to bring more women into that image.
Yeah. But anyway, so she says on Four Corners that parts of the Liberal Party have been algorithmed, and she used a verb, which was I think was interesting language.
Algorithmed in the sense that they're being told what to do, or they've been put into an echo chamber through an algorithm.
So they think that what's happening on their phone is the reality of Australians when it's not. This is her argument. Malcolm Turnbull made a similar argument where he said that Sky News is the best thing that's ever happened to the Labor Party because it's made the Liberal chase the far right and become unelectable and there's a big battle going on in there.
Because I've heard that where I can't remember where I heard it, but someone was telling me that like in Liberal Party branch meetings, they just talk about what happened on Sky News that week.
Yeah, totally.
Like that's the whole branch meeting.
Yeah, and the average Liberal Party branch member is in their 70s and they're a male.
Yeah,
and the average Australian is a woman in their 30s.
What was the difference? I saw when they had their conference, when the Liberal Party conference happened, there was like this endless line of walkers.
Yeah,
the senior citizens, outside the doors.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Labor Party has an aging membership as well. So
yes,
and this, I think this flows back into this this social media sort of issue because it's like, does centrism really cut through on social media?
Yeah, I actually had a conversation with someone about that. I think Nathan, we were talking about that. It's like, with Nathan Ogilvy, and like, how do you make that flavoursome?
Yeah.
It doesn't hit the same way. How do you market the centre?
Well, the centre's quite, it's kind of boring and it suits having gatekeepers who in the media who keep things a little bit boring because they don't want things to go off the rails, like the gatekeepers in the newspapers. I mean,
unless the aim of that media is to go off the rails.
Yeah.
As an example, Sky News, Murdoch Media,
or like the Daily Mail, or obviously there's
like the fringy ones. They want to go off the rails.
Yeah, obviously, I'm not here to like defend news media, like the print media of the like there's definitely been like the News of the World stuff in the UK, like the phone hacking. There's definitely been super like
there's been a Royal Commission in Australia discussing how toxic it can be and how bad it can be.
And like it can be very unethical and that, but like compared to social media, at least there's like some form of like, I don't know, an institution that can be at least questioned to be held to account, like, so, centrism probably like, fits better into the bounds of the old media landscape, than, social media, which, if this is the argument, like we've in this like two-parter, we've sort of thrown up three hypotheses for the rise of the populist right. One's the economy.
Yep.
One's we called it cultural stuff, but really it's racial tension.
Yeah.
And then the third one is the social media algorithm. And if you think about like how boring sensible centrism is on social media and how it rewards things that are like, violent or aggressive or, upsetting, and because it's trying to find something that people want to look at.
Yeah, like the car crash argument.
Yeah, you can kind of see maybe there's something to this, like, maybe the attention economy and the way that social media is become so addicted to, taking people's time.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's the only way they can expand. Like they've got this functional like monopoly on human human access, right?
Yeah.
Like everybody or the vast majority of people use it to some degree. But then they're like, well, how do we grow? Like, how do we grow? Like the only way for us to grow is to take more and more time.
Of the attention span from people.
Yeah.
That's the new product.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
like your time is the product. And the way to do that is to push people's buttons, and then that also the algorithm, the way that it like makes people sort of, it feeds, as you're saying, like feeds people what they're tuning into.
Yeah.
it pushes people down into warrens.
Because like if there was an example of, these algorithms are very unique for people, but they're like built in a way to sway you one way or the other. But I guess as an example, like with the sexiness, like is there any centrist media on social media that would be, or content on social media that would be appealing? It's hard to find, or because as an example, my Bridge by Words, the interviews I do, very apolitical, very centrist. That's the aim. Because, I think good ideas can come from any side or anywhere, right? It's just, that's a different topic. But what I'm getting at is like with the Instagram for that, I'll have, one post from the Liberal Party complaining about this, Labor's not doing this, Labor's not doing that, we'll do this, we'll cut your taxes, blah, blah, blah. And then the second post will be about Labor building schools and stuff like that. And that's on either end of the spectrum. But there's no, like the way, because I'm following all these different politicians from different parties, it's pretty centrist, I feel. Like that profile.
You've got to be an outlier in Australia.
Yeah,
sure.
which I feel like the algorithm's having trouble trying to find me something that's in the middle.
Right.
Because I don't get much. It's either this side or that side, and it just every second post it's just washing and like shuffling a deck of cards.
That's interesting.
But I haven't got anything on that profile that is inherently centrist.
Well, I think centrism kind of maybe lends itself well to some like podcasts and
some
longer
podcasts.
Form media.
Yeah, because
it's hard to condense like pragmatism in public policy into like a 30-second clip.
Yeah.
Because
I'll do some research. I'll see what I can do.
Clip that.
I'll try and find some. I'll try and create that centrist content if I can.
And centrist might be a bad word, but like maybe like pragmatic in terms of like we're not just, or maybe anti-populist. Like a critique of populism is that it really just wants to benefit from a problem.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have a solution for it.
Yeah, which is, I guess, the fortunate case of fringe parties.
Yeah. So, and without unencumbered with I know like probably heaps of people in the Greens are going to like want to stab me for saying this, but unencumbered with the responsibility of having to like actually like run the country and deal with all of the stakeholders and have realized that government's actually about competing interests and trade-offs and sometimes the answers to problems are zero sum. Like you have to take away from one group to give to another.
Yeah.
That sort of like that forces you to go, we've got to, there's a lot more nuance to the argument, which doesn't cut through on social media. Like nuance just doesn't work on a reel because it's just, it's 30 seconds. There's no, like a TikTok, there's just not enough room. There's not enough room to have like a debate.
Yeah. Especially in that short form.
Yeah. And that's how people consume media. So, like Marshall McLuhan, he might say, this is happening writ large. My theory is actually happening in the Western world right now. And that's why you're seeing the splintering of the political center, and this fragmentation and all these like, little upstart parties coming in. And so, it's another theory to throw into the fold, and like, yeah, like things are all happening at once. Like, there has been a decline in living standards in a lot of Western countries.
There has been an uptick in migration across the world.
Yeah. Post-COVID. I mean, the people move around.
Either regional instability, natural disasters, whatever.
Just people fleeing, wars. I mean, there's so many wars in the world right now. Like it's the world's a really dangerous place right now. Like, people move around, when they're fleeing for their lives. So, so, social media, I don't know, social media might actually be playing a big role here, I think.
Yeah.
Which is, I think ties into something like, this is something I haven't watched, but you told me you've watched it. The Pauline Hanson's like cartoon
cartoon content
movie. thing?
Oh, there's There's like a whole series she has of just short videos, like 5-minute most on YouTube. And then somehow that's built enough traction and amusement from people. And now she's produced a feature length cartoon, an hour and 20 minutes.
Yeah. Which I'm sure has been clipped to hell and is like all over Instagram and TikTok.
Yeah,
right
I haven't
now.
seen it clipped out. And I think
we're not in that echo chamber.
I'm not in that sphere.
Yeah. What's it about? As I haven't watched it and I don't think I will.
The movie?
Or just
like the little shorts at the time, because it's a cartoon and the way the show is animated, you can do speedy production on it. You know, the same way Rick and Morty's made, everything's sort of puppet to, stitched together joints.
This is your media training coming through.
Yeah, media training coming through. So it's easy to pump out. Yeah. Just control points, move it, right? So the show's little clips that she did on YouTube beforehand, they were all about the topic of that week or the topic of that month, and it would be pretty topical, like, ABC selling Bluey or something, and then that'd be a whole episode.
Yeah.
And I think there was a whole drama of Robert Irwin was in the clip.
Right.
And he wanted to sue because she portrayed Robert Irwin in one way and then he was threatening to sue and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so that in itself was already gaining traction and sort of like a subtle propaganda of Pauline Hanson is the answer. And then she's come out with this movie and it's overtly Pauline Hanson is the answer for a prosperous Australia in this movie. To the point where you just shove all the progressives into a little bubble in Naarm in Melbourne and you just ignore them. You just keep them contained. You put them away. That was kind of the answer to a peaceful, prosperous Australia.
Maybe Naarm's secession. Maybe Naarm would be a utopia of I don't know.
I'll maybe do it differently to the movie. The movie, yeah. But like, I did find aspects of it funny.
Okay.
But not... Yeah, I don't know. We could probably do a proper breakdown another day.
It's like Family Guy, right?
Yeah, it's just kind of like
offensive and
political Australian offensive.
Yeah,
Family Guy, silly humor,
but it's kind of
toilet humor.
But it's kind of like offensive as like not just offensive like swear words and poo poo wee wee. But
surprisingly, not heaps of swear words.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, but like racist sort of.
Yeah.
And divisive and I guess like what I'm asking about is like, do you think that
like the whole point of it is that like the divisive, contentious part is all of this progressive people.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. But then if you take them out of the equation, Australia can just be this happy, prosperous, sending Indigenous people to the moon utopia. That was the
crazy.
Yeah. Maybe we'll do a YouTube reacts video one day. Right. Who knows? We'll see how we go.
I was trying to avoid watching it. But I guess like my question, if you haven't been the resident expert on One Nation cartoons,
me apparently, yeah.
Okay. Do you think that plays well on social media?
If people take segments and clip it up, probably.
Yeah.
We'll do some
Do you think it plays better than like?
Or people send us clips, and maybe we'll do a part 2 on this thing. But
and like, do you think it plays better than some like the Minister for Transport talking about, train line gauges?
Oh, you'd get more views on like a clip cartoon thing. But that comes back to, I remember hearing this theory of right wing and fascism, that as one group constantly clashes with creativity. Hence why AI has been the platform for people to pump out this, their views or their narrative of, right-wing ideas. Trump always pumping out little AI images of him flying jets, dumping poo on Chicago.
That horrible
and stuff
racist
like
video of the Obamas
as monkeys and stuff like that, right? Because no one's going to personally be creating that. But these AI tools have made it easier for people to just, wouldn't it be funny if Obama was a monkey? And then type it and send it, done, video created. I can share that.
Yeah.
Right. So unintentionally, AI has become this tool for people who either, I'm not saying that this probably accidentally falls into the bigotry of low expectations, but it's like people that are maybe just busy trying to live their life and have certain views and get pulled down these rabbit holes, giving them these tools to come across as creative and create this short-term AI slop. I don't know where I'm going with the point, but that's what it feels like.
Yeah.
But in the sense that, this right-wing fascism doesn't it clashes with creativity and art and freedom of expression.
Yeah.
Goes back to World War II, Mussolini stomping down any cartoonists that portrayed him in a wrong way, or Hitler, how dare you make these films about me and this and that, and then turning art or means of media into propaganda.
Yeah.
In that sense, where there was a female director, I think it was, that Hitler hired to do all the propaganda of like, look how powerful our soldiers are. Look at all these marches.
In the medium of the time, which was the cinema.
Which is film and cinema, right? So then you would go see a local film at the local cinema. Beforehand, the ads that played would be, how good is the Nazi party?
So they made feature films, right? About how great the soldiers were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then it's a double-edged thing, double-edged sword of like the US was doing the same thing in the US, with making their propaganda films.
Yeah.
About how good the US is fighting in wars and medium at the time.
In this epoch of the media, shifting like from TV film to 30-second vertical reels.
Yeah. Same thing. It's a repeat. Rhymes. History rhymes.
I think there might be an argument that vertical video is somewhat responsible for the rise in One Nation polling in Australia.
Really?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what we're talking about, right? This whole well, it's a two-parter now, but
just the fact that a video is vertical,
the algorithm, the short nature of it, which doesn't leave any space for nuance.
Which is perfect for, I think I was talking about with this with Nathan Ogilvy, is like the fascist playbook is being able to do it the rule of threes.
Yeah.
If you can sum something down into 3 words, build the wall.
Yeah, totally.
Sloganeering. Boom, that's 30 seconds. Jingoism. That's an ad, throw it out, jingo, bang.
Yeah, totally. And it's,
so like this medium is perfect for it.
You can reduce like this really complicated policy issue into, something that is small enough that it obscures all of the the real causes of the ills of society.
Because just thinking on it, like historically, it would have been the reason why newspapers have headlines.
Yeah.
Right. You read that and you feel informed.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
You may or may not read the full article.
Yeah.
But now we've kind of let go of the article. It's just read the headline. There you go.
Yeah. And don't even read it. Like stare at it for 1 second and flick to the next thing until you see something that titillates you or scares you or makes you feel angry, and then you hover over it and doom scroll, and then you end up in this kind of alternate universe.
History rhymes.
Yeah. So I think that's our 3 theories. I don't know really which one's true.
Yeah, I guess I'll ask a closing question then if you want to round it out.
Yeah, sure.
Or you got more to go? What do you got?
No. Yeah.
How you feeling?
No. Yeah,
good. So like, if it is motivated by culture, does that make reconciliation harder?
Well, I mean, everybody's trying to make the economy fair, and it's it hasn't really been working all that well in the West for quite a while. So fixing the economy and distribution and making society fair is like a perennial issue that is like really contested, and I mean, we've been fighting elections over this since the dawn of humanity. It's like but
the dawn of democracy. Yeah.
You could make an argument the pendulum swung towards unfairness, and then that's why we're seeing all of this, a realignment of political parties and all of this like populism bubbling up, and
the
there's political
insecurity of these multi-parties,
insecurity, and but yeah, it's obviously it's like hard to fix the economy. Everybody wants to do that. They just disagree on how to do it. The cultural stuff, it is harder. I mean, it's like the original sin of the United States, slavery, and in Australia, colonialism, and the the White Australia policy has a long shadow. And like, I mean, I think the story of human history is people moving around, right?
It's always been there. It's always been migration out of Africa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, it goes back millennia. We still haven't figured out a way to get along.
Like humans moving around has happened longer in history than we've had borders.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
Hunter-gatherer and migrating.
Yeah, totally.
I think it's like a 10,000 year period before we even started planting and growing our own.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Or
we were like nomadic, hunter-gatherers.
Yeah. And then from there, it was like from when we first started planting to when we started writing things down, there was an even bigger gap. Not a bigger gap, but like there was still a big gap there too.
Yeah.
Like this is all a blink.
Yeah.
Let's not get into that topic, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, the third one, I mean, the social media thing. It
feeds it, I feel. I feel like there's on both fronts, on the economic and social, there's already like kindling. Yeah. And then the social media just throws fire on it.
Yeah. And then,
fuel on the fire.
And fixing that. I mean, I think it's like, the Marshall McLuhan medium is the message sort of argument. It's like, it might be the iPhone might be the one of the biggest hinge points in human history.
The fact that we've put the internet in our hand.
Yeah. I actually kind of believe that, actually.
Mm.
And we don't know where it winds up. Because, we're still literally in the middle of the experiment.
Yeah.
We've run this experiment on ourselves and our children as well, where we're just like, have constant information stimulation every waking moment that you're alive. Mm-hmm. Like your life's gone from being, just a person in the world to being a person who, I sound like an old man yells at cloud, whatever. Mm-hmm. But it's like your life is like moments of staring at a black rectangle interspersed with other movement.
Yeah.
You walk to the bus stop and then you stare at the thing. You get on the bus and you stare at the thing. You get to work and then you don't do work because you just stare at the thing.
Yeah.
And then,
or even your job is stare at thing. Stare at screen.
And the iPhone and the apps that are on it, like they cease to exist. Their whole growth model is like consuming more and more and more of your time by making you more and more angry and, sort of stimulated.
Yeah. There's two factors that keep that thing going. And watching it and people throwing things into it.
Yeah. And then surely that changes politics. Surely that changes political systems. Mm-hmm. So, it's funny because when I was reading before this podcast, I was like sort of thinking that the technological determinism argument was kind of a bit like au fait, but now I've actually talked myself into it. So, mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I guess to round this out, I
was feeling like asking another question, but yeah, what do you got?
Well,
yeah, round it out.
Maybe One Nation's maybe One Nation's just a flash in the pan. Like Angus Taylor's the leader now, and maybe the other thing that we didn't address at all in this discussion of these really big ideas mm-hmm. was something much smaller and much more like plain and boring, and that might actually be like maybe Liberal voters didn't like Susan Lee, and Susan Lee's gone.
Yeah.
So now they're going to stop throwing a tantrum and they're going to go back to Liberal Party and we're going to be back to where we were. Maybe
it's not culturalism. Maybe it's just sexism.
Maybe we've just been like talking about this for a couple of hours and
thanks for listening though.
and it's really just that simple. They were just pissed off at the Liberal Party.
Yeah.
And now they're going to be less pissed off at the Liberal Party and that was it.
Or swapping out to Angus Taylor, who's a bit more right wing in the Liberal umbrella,
and a bloke,
is a reaction to One Nation raising the polls. Because
of course,
where would those One Nation people coming from?
Yeah, of course,
the Liberal Party.
Yeah, of course. But then maybe Australia is the outlier. Maybe Australia was the outlier post GFC because we had a better crisis than all the rest of the Western countries.
Jealous.
And maybe we'll still be the outlier.
Maybe.
I mean, I kind of hope.
The fact that Albanese won as an incumbent. The fact that
in a period of inflation
in Canada won as an incumbent.
Yeah.
While Trump was soaring in the US.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. One other interesting thing that I thought was like, that I read when I was, looking into stuff for this podcast was that Trump actually threatened to start a third party.
Yeah.
After Republicans were threatening to impeach him, he was making a big song and dance towards the end of his first term about running as a third party and just smashing the Republicans. So yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting that in America it's happened inside the tent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rather than because it's a two-party system. That's how.
Yeah. Well, it's also
because like historically, whenever they do try to bring in a third, that's when the other guy wins.
It's
and
also
Australia a similar thing.
Well, Australia's got preferential voting. Which,
but I mean more as a historical example in Australia, it was like when there was the Labor split between the Catholics and the the economics. When there was a split there, that's when the Liberals got in, or at least Menzies.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Menzies got in because one side was divided.
Menzies himself, created the Liberal Party by uniting all of the sort of warring right factions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then in the US, similar thing when Teddy Roosevelt, he broke off to do his own party.
Yeah.
And then the Democrats got in. And then World War I. Yeah.
I
think history is a thing I know sometimes.
History is interesting.
Yeah. She rhymes.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Because preferential voting systems are actually supposed to create multi-party coalitions, like theoretically.
Yeah.
So Australia is kind of an outlier there as well, because in Europe where they have preferential voting systems,
constant coalitions,
they have these like big coalitions of disparate votes, and the theory goes that like if you have a third party in a first past the post system where it's just a majority takes all, and then you only get one preference, then everybody feels like they're wasting their vote if they go to a third party.
Yep. They feel like their voice doesn't matter.
Yeah. Now that should be holding back reform in the UK, but people there are just like so angry about the state of public services and the declining standard of living that it's just like, it's gotten over that hurdle and people are just like, no.
Yeah.
But in the States, like, Trump had to come up through the Republican Party because
I feel like he hijacked it.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. But yeah, so, like maybe Australia is just like creaking towards this multi-party thing because of our preferential voting system.
That's the theory I've heard, is that's what's kept us safe. I can't remember what Canada's voting system's like, but a similar thing of why did the Liberal Party there, which is their Labor, how did they stay in?
Yeah.
Well, it's more. Yeah, their Liberal Party is more like our Liberal Party, but anyway, whatever.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, interesting.
But I think one of the main reasons that, their Liberal Party got in is because they were the only party that weren't backing this whole Trumpism, because Trump was saying we're going to annex Canada.
Yeah. Well, that really rallies the support. If, an external threat.
Because they say that's what killed Dutton here. The fact that he was cozy up to Trump, or liked the idea of.
Totally. Yeah, Donald Trump's done a lot to elect center left parties in other parts of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So, we can thank you for that at least, I suppose.
Thanks. Yeah, I guess we probably should round it out and end it. But
cool.
There was one good question.
Yeah.
From everything we've discussed in this one.
Yeah.
And I guess the other one, what would mainstream parties need to understand to respond effectively?
I mean, well, it would be really great if they could make, the standard of living of Australians improve. And that means real wage growth. And that means more fair, accessible access to housing, which is a huge, everything's housing, is, I think I keep saying to everybody. And then on the social media side, they can they can adapt. You know, they can get rid of the old guard in the parties that are communicating via press release and legacy media, and get on Twitch and play Fortnite, and get on Instagram and TikTok and make
why doesn't
talk to people?
Yeah, why doesn't Australia have a Latina baddie playing Twitch?
Yeah.
Like AOC in the US, you know? Why
she's playing Among Us and talking to Gen Z and millennial voters.
Yeah. Humanize yourself a bit more.
Yeah. Zora Mandani, you know, like walking around basically doing like a hot takes, you know, TikTok influencer thing. I mean, you know, like
they say that Albo going on all those podcasts leading up to the election really helped him.
Huge help, for sure.
Huge help.
Yeah.
Humanized him a bit more.
Yeah, totally. And authenticity is the currency of politics now. Like, I think like more so than competence, you know, like, I think if you're, you know, I remember, hearing this like wild take. I can't remember who it was from, but it was basically saying like Hunter Biden going on a podcast and talking about being a drug addict.
Yeah.
Made him like,
so much more popular.
Well, made him like a kid, like someone that,
because he was on Andrew Callahan's Channel 5. Yeah.
Like, and made him somebody that, you know, as a contender, you know, like he went from this pariah to this, and they were like, this guy can go on a podcast and talk for 3 hours about addiction, which is like every male coded podcast is like, you know, Theo Von talking about, you know, doing coke with Ed Sheeran and stuff. And, and like, you know, like there's a huge, political dividend for any political candidate that can be authentic and, you know, perform in media spaces where people actually are.
Not just ABC or Sky News.
Yeah, like no one's watching Insiders. I watch Insiders every week, but you know, I'm like the biggest dork in the world.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be recommending, you know, if I was advising a politician, I wouldn't be recommending them go on Insiders.
Yeah.
I'd be recommending them go on Twitch.
Yeah. Or I know there's a startup Australian podcast that's a bit more humanizes the political role called Bridge by Words.
Oh yeah, they're going that.
I think politicians should come on that more.
Yeah, totally.
This is an open invite to any
Easy
politician or staff that's listened to this.
Yeah.
Get in touch.
Sick.
I'm sorry to plug another one in this one.
No, you should.
But yeah, you know, yeah, I like that. That's a good answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Be part of the media. The medium.
So yeah, and you got to adapt, otherwise you'll get left behind.
Yep.
Yeah.
Dude, great episode. Part 2.
Awesome.
Cultural and cut. Beautiful. Done.
All right. It was fun.
Bye.
See ya.